Some Survivor players come into their first season and obtain instant stardom, while others are complete flops. But the benefit of the Survivor franchise is that sometimes WTF picks get to come back and prove they had what it took to achieve legendary status in spite of an awful showing in their first season.
Normally it's that I'm Brad's wife, but when it comes to Survivor, I'm the wily veteran here.
Firstly, let's rewind to Survivor One World. Monica comes in as the wife of an ex-NFL player, Brad Culpepper, and right away she's branded as the mom figure. But One World was, well, One World. You had Colton running around like he owned the game, alliances shifting every minute, and Monica kind of just stuck in the middle of the mess. It's kind of like getting sucked into a tornado, except the tornado winds every 5 seconds, and he has an African-American housekeeper. But regarding Monica in season 24, well, she wasn't a big personality, and she wasn't in the main alliance. By episode 5, she's voted out, and didn't even make the merge. At the time, fans called her irrelevant, and if we're being honest, Monica's One World legacy is basically being nice, being athletic for her age, and then getting snuffed before anyone even remembered she was playing. It's not exactly Hall of Fame material. Then came Survivor Blood vs. Water, and the casting twist here is huge. Monica wasn't really brought back because of Monica, she was brought back as Brad Culpepper's loved one. So it doesn't bode well when you're brought back not because of your prior game, but because of who you bridge connections with for Survivor. And here's the funny part. Brad was the one the show expected to shine with his fame and physicality, but instead Brad becomes a pre-merge casualty while Monica suddenly gets a second chance. It's like Survivor went to the Culpepper house looking for a quarterback and accidentally found an MVP in the pantry. Without Brad around, Monica steps up in a big way. She's physically dominant in challenges, pulling out wins when her tribe needs them. She's socially flexible, working with Tyson, Jervis, and overall the dominant alliance. And while she isn't the biggest strategic mover, she plays a loyal, dependable game that takes her all the way to day 39. What makes Monica's run in Blood vs. Water so interesting is how different she felt compared to One World. In One World she was invisible, but in Blood vs. Water she was always in the mix. She wasn't driving strategy like Tyson, but she was controlling her own narrative, strong in challenges, loyal to her alliance, and very aware of her position. In fact, she won 3 individual immunities, proving she wasn't just coasting, she was an actual competitor. Even the jury recognized she was playing hard. Did they respect it enough to give her the win? No. Tyson dominated strategically and got the votes. But Monica's second place finish was light years ahead of her One World flop. It's wild when you think about it. Monica Culpepper went from pre-merge boot you'd never expect to see again to sitting at final tribal council, giving the Tyson Apostle a run for his money. She's basically the Survivor version of a kid in high school who shows up to the reunion totally transformed, like, wait, that's Monica? Didn't she get voted out before the merge? For casual fans, she's remembered as a loyal finalist. For super fans, she's remembered as the player who turned a casting twist into a career resurrection. And honestly, that's iconic in its own way. However, ironically, would you believe me if I told you she isn't even the highest placing Culpepper on this list?
I'm trying to let everybody come to me, and I find myself saying, WWMD, what would Monica do?
Brad Culpepper entered Blood vs. Water with all the hype. Former NFL player, natural leader, physically intimidating, basically casting catnip. But from day one, Brad came in way too hot. On Tad Hanna, he played like a quarterback, barking out plays, except his teammates weren't linemen. They were rookie Survivor players who didn't appreciate being ordered around. He became the face of every vote, openly bossing his tribe around and bragging about being in control. By episode 4, he was the enemy number 1. Caleb Moss ended up pulling off one of the most underrated moves, a vote flip that blindsided Brad right before the swap. And let's be real, Brad's legacy was being Monica's husband. In Blood vs. Water, his legacy was being heckled at Redemption Island by the woman he had voted out. Not a great resume. And then Game Changers. And honestly, when Brad's name was announced, most fans rolled their eyes. Brad's a game changer? Really? But here's where the story gets interesting. Brad clearly studied what went wrong in Blood vs. Water, and then came back with a completely different approach. Instead of barking orders, he softened his image. He led with charm, patience, and social skills, and maybe a few pre-game alliances. And guess what? It worked. From the very first episode, Brad was positioned as a provider, a protector, and a loyal ally. He wasn't just the loud NFL guy anymore, he was a calm, calculating player. Casual fans were surprised, super fans were floored. So what made Brad so successful the second time around? Well, firstly the social game. He leaned into relationships, particularly with Sierra Dawn Thomas. He wasn't a dictator anymore, he listened, built trust, and let others feel included. Then were his challenge performance. Brad turned into a beast post-merge, winning 5 individual immunities and putting himself into the company of Survivor's greatest competitors. Not bad for a guy in his late 40s. And finally, strategic restraint. Unlike Blood vs. Water, Brad, who wanted to control every vote, Game Changers Brad was a lot more selective. He struck when necessary. He didn't overplay his hand. By the time he reached Survivor Day 39, Brad wasn't just Monica's husband anymore. He was a finalist with a legitimately strong game. Now, did Brad win? No. Sarah Lacina played one of the most cutthroat and strategic games in Survivor history, and she earned the win. But Brad's pitch wasn't bad. He leaned heavily on his challenge dominance, his loyalty to his allies like Troyzan, and his overall transformation as a player. The jury wasn't quite sold. Many players felt he lacked Sarah's killer instincts and came off as a hypocrite when saying he didn't play dirty. However, he was championed by people such as Ozzy and even received a substantial number of votes to win. Still going from Blood vs. Water's pre-swap disaster to Game Changers runner-up as one of the biggest Survivor glow-ups ever. In a way, Brad and Monica swapped roles between their seasons. In one world, Monica flopped, then came back in Blood vs. Water to make the final Tribal Council. Brad flopped in Blood vs. Water, then came back to Game Changers to make Final Tribal Council. It's the Survivor equivalent of trading off who has to feed the dog.
That's great and all, but have you heard of something better? It's called Idle Plays. Idle Plays is the sponsor of this video with over a dozen puzzles that are Survivor inspired so that you can play Survivor from the comfort of your own home. You don't have to fly over to Fiji, you don't have to starve on an island, you can actually play the Survivor puzzles for yourself, and there's over a dozen on the store, including the fire puzzle, Will It Go Round, and many, many more. So make sure to check out Idle Plays, the link is in the description, and also use Bandit Survivor 10 to be able to help me out.
You know what, Jeff? I may be on the bottom, but I'm not ready to go home yet.
Oh my God.
Let's be real here. In San Juan del Sur, Kelley barely existed on screen. She came back with her dad, Dale, and Survivor quickly told us, hey, look at this father-daughter dynamic, then proceeded to promptly bury them in the edit. Whenever it wasn't a day ending in a Y, we actually did see Kelley on the show. She was socially solid, decent in challenges, and actually had a good read on the game, but she was never really in the majority, and she was taken out before the merge. Her big move? Trying to keep her dad calm while John Mish told Dale his corn husk glasses weren't helping him. Not exactly a legendary debut, but here's where Survivor gets fun. Because of Survivor's second chance twist, fans got a vote who came back for Survivor Cambodia, and Kelley, despite being a pre-merge boot, was cast. Why? Well, Survivor superfans recognised she had untapped potential, and wow, did she prove them right. From the jump, Kelley came in ready to play. On day 3, she found an idol hidden at a challenge. That was a Survivor first. Suddenly, the player who barely got any confessionals in San Juan del Sur was pulling off Indiana Jones moves in the middle of a physical competition. Casual fans were shocked. Superfans were cheering like they saw the second coming of Surrey Fields. At the merge, Kelley's idol play at the Savage vote is still one of the greatest moments in Survivor history. Sierra, Cass, and Abby were on the outs. Kelley was their 4th. She knew she was in trouble, and instead of rolling over, she slaps down an idol, negates 9 votes against her, and sends Savage packing with just a handful of votes. It was bold, it was dramatic, and it instantly transformed Kelley from an afterthought to a legend. This was the exact opposite of her San Juan del Sur story. She went from, oh yeah, Dale's daughter to Wentworth does not count in one season. Post-merge, Kelley didn't just sit back. She thought tooth and nail, won key immunities, and found another idol. She became the symbol of the underdog alliance, scrappy, unpredictable, and dangerous. She made it all the way to the penultimate tribal council and was voted out by the eventual final 3. Although her resume was strong, multiple idol finds, clutch plays, and surviving despite being on the bottom for most of the game. In other words, Kelley went from invisible to undeniable. The funny thing about Kelley's arc is that Survivor literally went from ignoring her to giving her hero music. Like in San Juan del Sur, she was voted out on day 19 with barely a story. In Cambodia, she got more epic slow motion shots than Aussie climbing a tree. She's also one of the rare players who genuinely improved. A lot of returnees either repeat the same mistakes or flame out. Kelley evolved, so she came with confidence, boldness, and a willingness to take a big swing. For casual fans, she's the girl with idol negates. For super fans, she's proof you should never underestimate a pre-merge boot.
However, what's going to happen is me, you, and Wentworth are voting for Jeremy. We are blindsiding Jeremy.
Some Survivor players are instant icons, and others take quite literally 15 years to glow up. Kimmi Kappenburg went from being remembered as an awful player in the Australian Outback, where she didn't even make the merge, to nearly pulling off $1 million win in Cambodia. Yep, the woman once famous for arguing about chickens with Alicia somehow became a late-game power player. Let's talk about Kimmi's Survivor evolution. When you think of the Australian Outback, you think of Colby carrying the tribe on his back, Tina masterminding the win, or Jerry and Amber being the season's dramatic duo. Kimmi, she was the vegetarian who screamed about killing chickens. She clashed with Alicia in one of the show's first ever iconic Survivor fights, finger waving, shouting, the whole package. The edit made her look like comic relief, not a serious player. And in terms of gameplay, well, Kimmi didn't make the merge. She was taken out pre-merge for being too much of a liability. Survivor superfans labelled her as an early era flop, a name you'd only remember during a deep trivia night. Fast forward to 2015, Kimmi gets voted on for second chances, and the reaction was mixed. Some fans said, really? Kimmi, the chicken lady? But here's where things get good. In Cambodia, Kimmi didn't come back as comic relief. She came back ready to play. From day one, she was socially smoother, strategically aware, and was always willing to adapt. She formed bonds with people like Stephen Fishback, Jeremy Collins, and Tasha. Unlike the Outback, Kimmi, who stood for all the wrong reasons, Cambodia Kimmi blended in until it was the time to strike. And one of the most surprising things about Kimmi's game, it was her late game's final push. At final 6, she wanted to flip on the majority of Jeremy, Tasha, and Spencer, pulling in Keith and Kelley Wentworth to form a new majority. This was a huge move, the kind of thing you would have expected from Outback Kimmi. The plan didn't work, she got caught, and the fallout led to her elimination, but the fact that Kimmi was in the position to make a power move in the final 6 shows how far she had come. She wasn't a loudmouth pre-merger anymore, she was a legitimate player with her own strategic agenda. Kimmi's glow-up is one of the most underrated in Survivor history. In the Australian Outback, she was a punchline. In Cambodia, she was a serious contender who almost changed the outcome of the season. And the best part, she did it without completely abandoning her quirky, blunt personality. Kimmi still had her moments of being outspoken, but now she backed it up with her smart gameplay. For superfans, she became proof that early Survivor players weren't inherently bad. They just didn't always have the same chance to showcase their skills in the old school formats. Kimmi's story is basically Survivor's version of the long game meme. Imagine waiting 15 years to prove you're actually good at Survivor. That's dedication. Also, let's give credit to where it's due. Not many players can say they went toe-to-toe with Alicia Calloway and nearly orchestrated one of the most important flips in Survivor Cambodia. That's honestly quite the range.
I made moves that other people were scared to make. I made moves that I was scared to make. And I'm very proud of how I played.
In Cagayan, Sarah came in with a strong background, a police officer, physically sharp and self-confident. The brains versus brawn versus beauty twist gave her a good starting point on the brawn tribe. But Sarah's Cagayan game fell apart quickly once the swap shook things up. At the pre-merge stage, she was in a power spot, the supposed swing vote between Tony's Cops R Us alliance and her swap group. The problem? Sarah spent so much time announcing she was the swing vote that she forgot the Golden Survivor rule. If you tell everyone you've got the power, you probably don't. She became overconfident, declared herself as the kingmaker, and rubbed people the wrong way. Cass McQuillan famously flipped, and Sarah was sent home. So in Cagayan, Sarah's Survivor resume was try to be in the middle, got cocky about it, Cass flipped. Bye Bye Sarah. Casual Survivor fans remember her as a non-factor. For superfans, they had her pegged as a cautionary tale as how not to be a swing vote. Imagine playing on a Survivor season and having to be the second best of your profession. Then came Game Changers, and when Sarah was announced, the fan reaction was mixed. A lot of people said, wait, Sarah, a Game Changer? She barely made the merge last time. But Sarah came into the game with a completely new mindset. She even admitted it in confessionals. In Cagayan, she played like a cop, by the rules, enforcing order. In Game Changers, she was going to play like a criminal. And wow, did she deliver. Sarah's Game Changers performance is one of the best season evolutions ever, and here's why. In her social game, she built strong bonds across all sides. Her relationships felt genuine, which allowed her to infiltrate alliances and flip on them when needed. She wasn't bossy, she was approachable, friendly, and disarming. She had strategic boldness. Sarah didn't just flip, she timed her flips to perfection. She took out her allies when it benefited her game, like blindsiding Debbie, voting out Sierra while snatching her legacy advantage, and orchestrating key moves to keep herself in the driver's seat. She also had advantages. Sarah became a magnet for them. She had Sierra Dawn Thomas's legacy advantage, and she used the vote steal, and she leveraged them flawlessly. Final Tribal Council. Sarah argued her case brilliantly. She owned her cutthroat gameplay, admitted to manipulating people, and sold the jury on the idea that she outplayed everybody, which rewarded her with the million. The difference between Cagayan Sarah and Game Changer Sarah is night and day. In Cagayan, she was predictable, and in Game Changer, she was adaptable. In Cagayan, she told everyone she was a swing vote. In Game Changer, she silently became the swing vote. In Cagayan, Cass outplayed her. In Game Changers, Sarah outplayed, well, everyone. This is the definition of a Survivor glow-up. She didn't just improve, she went from pre-merge boot to champion. Sarah's transformation is like Survivor Bootcamp. Day 1 Sarah was like, I'm a cop, I play by the rules, and by day 39, she was basically Tony with better social skills. For casual fans, Sarah is remembered as the cop who finally learned how to be a criminal. For superfans, she's one of the best examples of how you can learn from your mistakes and completely reinvent yourself in Survivor. And let's not forget, her win in Game Changers is even more impressive when you consider the cast. She outplayed legends like Sandra, Sari, and Ozzy. That's like winning a spelling bee against Scrabble legends. In the end, Sarah Lacina's story is one of Survivor's most impressive evolutions. From overconfident flop in Cagayan to mastermind champion in Game Changers, she proved that a second chance is all you need to rewrite your legacy. To change that subscribe button, hit it if you're unsubscribed, and you can turn it white to become a rogue. Have a good day. Peace!